Hi friends, I'm Pam and welcome to A Scrappy Little Joy. Today we are celebrating block 11 for our Weekly Whim project. Here's our block. I'm so absolutely overjoyed about this block. It has been the funnest one to design and make, and I hope that you will love it as much as I love it. It's a really fun block. Okay, so first things first, if you're new to us here or if you need a little reminder, all of our patterns can be found. Patterns are done here in our video. All of our cutting instructions can always be found below in the description section of this video. Here is our pattern for our block called A Place to Belong. As you might imagine, that's one of the things that I really focus on in this group especially, is that we all feel welcome and a part of being here in whatever creative way you want to be for our Weekly Whim blocks, as well as just anything that we have going on here at A Scrappy Little Joy, this channel. So we have our cutting instructions here, and there's quite a few of them, especially for especially for fabric C. So what I did, as I've done once before when we had a few extra pieces for one, I've given you some little tags if you need to print those out. They're a part, it's just a 2-page pattern. If you don't feel like you need them, don't worry about printing them. But this is just our way to make sure that we're keeping track. It also helps me keep track while we're talking today, and I'm making sure that I am calling out the right measurements so that you know which piece we need. So here's our cutting instructions. I'm going to move my pincushion over here for the moment because we have a big space here. I'm kind of excited about this. Oh, these are also there for anybody who needs letter tiles. If you're new to us, I like to always make sure that we have those so that we can mark our fabrics in relationship to the pattern. This is our fabrics or my fabric choice from our box. And for all of you who are new here, first of all, if you are new here, I would be delighted if you wanted to stick around and like, subscribe, hit that little bell, and share about what we are doing here with our Weekly Whim project. For those of you who are new, these are our blocks, and Mr. Woods is coming up with something, but we're going to have a little field trip to my studio proper coming up here in a short, and we're going to talk just a little bit about how our block patterns, our blocks are coming together, our quilt is coming together one block at a time. So you can start to get a feel for where we're really going with these various sized blocks and how they're going to start to come together, and you can start to envision them along with me as we go. Here is my box, and of all of the fabrics that are in our previous blocks, today, oh, why are you on the floor, little friend? Today, we need a magnet. I'm just going to put you right here so you can be cheerful and a part of our day. Today, I have chosen from my box, from our previous blocks, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 fabrics that we've used previously, and these are a couple of little extras that I wanted to throw in, because here's the thing, friends, I needed grass, and I'm a literalist, kind of. See my grass? And I wanted it to be grass green. So I've chosen that. I've also chosen this pink door. I just wanted a pink door. I don't know why. This print is from our very first block here. And what I like about this is that it has a little bit of a stripe, and it kind of feels like siding or bricks to me. So that's why I chose this fabric. And I felt like I needed a sunny window, so I wanted to use that nice yellow right there. I've also chosen for my roof a stripe pattern. So you might want to think about how you are, if you're choosing directional fabrics, how your rectangles, how you'll want to cut your rectangles if you want them to go in one direction or the other. And the same goes for the roof if you decide you want to do that. For my sky, I decided to opt with a nice little background, which could have been blue. I was thinking about blue, but I really don't have a blue. So what I decided, I always feel like these little, this little fabric is little blue birds just flying everywhere. So that's why I chose these fabrics for this. Okay, So what we have is all of our fabrics. I'm going to put them in my box and tuck my box away. And we're going to look here at what we have. Let me just see. I want to make sure that we can see our illustration here. There we go. So that all of our fabrics, we are working with some fairly large fabrics. Let me take my shoes off as I do. Some fairly large pieces for some of our work here. What we're going to do is start with our roof unit, and that is fabric A for the roof and fabric B for our sky. Okay, so let's pop those in there, and I'm going to just move this over here out of our way. Let me see, a little. You go there, you go there. I don't think I'm going to use my pins too much today, but you may want to. And always remember, if you feel like you need to pin and I'm not pinning, go ahead and pin, my friends. I pin less and less when we're talking here, unless I'm specifically talking about pinning or talking about why you would need to pin in a certain place. But I always want you to know that part of that is because I like to keep our process moving along comfortably here so that I'm not taking too long, but I really want you to be sewing along with me so that I can be sharing things as we're going along. So usually it's a case of saying, okay, here's our video, you've downloaded this, and you've gathered all your scraps or all of your pieces, and then we're sitting down to sew together. That's kind of how I envision this always. Okay, so what we need is our two great big squares, okay? And they're going to represent our sky unit. What you'll see here, this is a great big flying geese unit, obviously. But what I've done here is given you two opportunities to oversize this block. First of all, I've given you cut sizes that are a little bit on the big side. But there's also another way that you can oversize this block so you've got just a little more trimming room. First things first, let's start. You'll need a diagonal line on the back of your two pieces, your two squares, your two great big squares. And what we're going to do is position the right-hand square with the diagonal line going right here. And what we're going to do is we are going to sew not directly on this line, but we are going to sew just north of this line, okay? So that when we trim and flip this, we're going to have just a little bit more room, okay? So, plus there's another reason for sewing that way, and I'll show you that when after we get it sewn. So we're going to sew just on the outside. So kind of like when we think in terms of scant quarter of an inch, and we're going to want to start right up here at the top. Remember, because if we start here at the point, it's going to drive our needle, or it's going to drive that little point right down in that hole of our sewing machine if we're not careful. So we're going to start up here on a nice flat line first. And remember, so you could pin here, and you know what? Because I don't have a flat bed, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to toss a pin right here and toss a pin right here. These are pins that are not going to interfere, so we're not going to need to pull them out. But this is a big piece of fabric. I got to scooch it. I got to scooch it, friends. It's a little bit, there we go. See, do you do this? Just use your nails to like kind of scooch your fabric. You don't have to have long nails, because you know I don't have long nails. Every time I get long nails, they just get in the way. I have had my moments in time of having long nails. Believe me, I'm just not a fan. I'm a little bit more practical at this stage in my life. Okay, there, that took me a while. Okay, now I'm going to sew on that north side, just to the north side, just like I'm doing a scant quarter of an inch here. You go a little. Hi Jane, I missed you. It's been a week. I haven't sewn with Jane since we were together last week. Also, Mr. Woods and I were talking about this light being rather yellow for my machine light. couple of things. I have some thoughts about maybe some other strip lighting that I could put in here, but I would love to know, I know several of you have featherweights. Is there a brighter light that's not yellow for this? Is there a whiter light? Do any of you do different things for your featherweights or your older machines so that that light is not quite so yellow? You go there, little friend. Okay, so now what we have is we've sewn just on that. I didn't think I needed that, my pins, but of course I do. We've sewn just on the right hand side, or the side that we're going to cut off. I'm going to do the lefty cut, and we're going to take 1/4 of an inch from that seam allowance. Now, real quick, I've had a couple of you suggest, look at this great big potential half square triangle. If you wanted to make this a half square triangle to begin with, then you could conceivably draw a line 1/2 inch from that seam you've just sewn, draw that line, and then sew on the, let's see, 1/2 inch? Yeah. And then sew on that line, and then you could cut right down the middle of these two, and your half square triangle is already ready. So I have thought about that, and as a matter of fact, I thought about doing it when I was making multiple samples, because between the two of us, between you and me, I made a whole bunch of cutting off that half square triangle. I made a whole bunch of samples because I wanted to make sure that this is going to be big enough for us to have some trim room. Okay, so now if I've sewn right on that line, or I have sewn even on the inside of the line, as I pull this back, sometimes what you find is that it looks a little bit more like this here and this here, right? You follow me? But what we've done is we've given ourselves just a little bit more room, so that this, because we've got this fold here, this is going straight up to the top, and that's going to give us the most trimming room right up here at that point, and certainly also here. So we're going to press that toward the corner, if you will. And so I'm just going to finger press it, and then I'm going to press it. Okay, now what we want to do is get that other side, that other sky unit, if you will, square, and let's put that in the opposite corner with that diagonal line going right here. And then again, we're going to sew on this side of our line, okay? So we've got just a little bit of room. And I'm going to, again, start right up here rather than at the point, just so it's just a little bit easier on Jane and nothing gets jumbled up in her system. That's not comfortable. This is a big old long seam, friends. This is a very big block. As I was just kind of noodling over, often I will spend my Saturday or my Sunday evening in the studio working up a plan for our next block. And this was just one of those things. I was flipping through books and just different ideas. I thought, you know what we really need for our little neighborhood? We need a little house block. So that is what I put together. Plus, most importantly, I needed a rectangle block here. And that will come into play, and I will share with you when we have our little field trip to my studio proper. I'll explain why. I'm going to keep these little half square triangle pieces like here, because I want to make sure, I don't know what I want to do with those. I don't think I'm going to plan on using them. So let's go ahead and press right toward that, okay? I don't think I plan to use them in this. I at least haven't planned ahead at this point that I would use those for another block. But I might come up with some other idea, some other way that we could use them. I don't know. Okay, see, we've got all this room, and we've even got a little extra hang over here because I made that extra roomy. I sewed that way. So now what we do, let's remember how most effectively we can cut a flying geese unit. I got my big girl out here. Most effectively, I always start with that top point. That's the first place that I trim. This unit needs to be 6.5 inches by 12.5 inches. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I have enough room on this very top part to make sure that when I sew this block to another block, I'm not going to cut off my point. So I want to take it off this side first. So take your 1/4 inch here, and you're going to trim that, but you want to make sure this line is nice and straight and this line is nice and straight. So let's go ahead and take that off. Now, I'm not sure if my big mat will turn. Oh, it will turn here, even with Jane here. So I'll go ahead and turn that. Okay. Now what we want to do, because we need this to be 6.5 inches, we want to go 6.5 inches from that very top. Okay, so I am backwards in my brain because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. Yeah, because I'm a lefty, I'm always having to compensate my lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then there's an extra 1/2 inch here. So I want my line. I know I've just trimmed this, so I know it's straight. And now I want to line it up 6 inches from the bottom. 6.5 inches, I'm sorry, 6.5 inches from the bottom. So I know now that this measurement is 6.5 inches. Now let's do our sides. And I probably don't need this ginormous ruler. Oh, sorry, Mr. Light. Now what we do, maybe I do need this ginormous one, and here's why. Let's look, if I can explain this to you. If this has to be 12.5 inches, that means it needs to be 6.25 inches from the center this way and 6.25 inches from the center this way. And this is how every time we're going to get it nice and square. So let's go ahead and look at where this point is, the very center of our half-square triangle, of our flying geese unit. And we want that right at 6.5. And so if I've got 6 here, maybe I'll turn it this way so it's a little bit easier for you to see that I'm going to be at 6.5. So I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.25. That's what I'm saying. 6.25. And I know I cut this, so I know this is straight and I know this is straight, so I want those lines to line up. 6.25 is right down the center here. And I'm going to take that side off. Okay? And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm going to go 6.25 right down the center. There's my 6, there's my 1/4. I'm backwards because I'm a lefty. I'm okay with that. I own it. I wear it like a badge, for those of you who know me. It's one of my favorite things about me. Okay, there we go. And there is our 6.5 by 12 inch roof unit. So now I'm just going to put that right back here. Now let's start looking at the rest of our parts. Let's take our fabric. Let's put our window part together. Let's take our 3.25 by 4 inch rectangle, house rectangle, and our what do we say? Our window, our fabric D, whatever that is for you. We're going to put the big one on the bottom, the big rectangle on the bottom, and we're going to sew that with a scant 1/4 inch. There are a lot of pieces and parts in here, so we want to go ahead and make sure that we're giving ourselves that scant 1/4 inch. And these, because there are no seams other than our roof unit, I'm going to be inclined, in most cases, all cases, to press open. You know what I really want to know? for those of you who follow along and frequently comment in my posts here at the, so I'm going to press that open because this is not going to, this seam isn't going to run into any other seam, so that it would need to nest. So for those of you who are inclined to comment, I would love to know your take on pressing open. Is this something that's new to you since you've been starting to watch my videos? Or is this something that you're comfortable with, you're not comfortable with? If you're not comfortable with it, tell me why. I'd like to know about that so we can talk about it. Okay, so now what we need is our 6.5 by 1 1/4. That's going to be over here, okay? So let's go ahead and fold that in. And we're going to sew that at a scant 1/4 inch. See, it doesn't matter. Nothing. This is a straight piece. There's no seams for our little window to nest against. So I tend to often, I will go upside right or up to where the seam is on top. If I've got a flat piece that I'm going to sew it to with no seams, that way I don't risk that little seam allowance getting flipped in the other direction. And I don't feel, also you'll see me do this as well if you're looking at this camera, on this camera, I'm holding here and I'm just taking this and I'm making sure that's nice and straight. And this is how I avoid having to pin all the time. And I take my time and I get to that point and then I double check that that both of my seams or both of my fabrics are, the edges are lined up right together. I've got a whole bunch of my little leaders and enders. I worked on that this weekend too. I got a whole bunch of them ready because I have finished, I want to say 120, probably about 130 of them so far. So I just kind of worked out a plan and I think I'm going to need like 320 of these. So, but look, just for as long, I'm going to press this open, just with as long as you and I have been making our blocks, I have made that many my little log cabin blocks here that I'm going to be sewing together into a project, just using them as leaders and enders. So it has worked out very, very great, and I'm really, really happy with them. Okay, so now what we need next is the 2" by 6.5" rectangle, and that is going to be sewn right to this guy. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flip it over so that this seam allowance, see, I'm not getting all worried about it until I get this right where I need it to go. I'm going to put the one with the seam allowance on top so it doesn't get twisted over. And I'm going to just get started. And then I'm going to go here and take my 2 ends and I'm going to make sure that those line up, okay? Sometimes if you need, this is where, if you start sewing all the way here and you realize that your pieces are not going to line up properly, you have lost an opportunity to do a little bit of stretching if you need to do that. So get that tacked in, get these 2 lined up, and then you can take your little seam like that. And then you stand a chance of being able to even up those seams, those ends, so that they line up together. It isn't always about being perfect with our measurements, although accurate seam allowance is certainly the goal. But when we make those, when we take those little steps along the way to be able to, pressing open again, we take those little steps along the way to be able to compensate and tweak as we go along, we find that our blocks turn out pretty darn good, even if we are not perfect cutters, perfect measurers, or sewers with respect to the seam allowance. Okay, so let's put this here. Now I need my door. So we're going to put, look at, that's the prettiest little pink door. Let's see, I think I want my triangles up. I think I put them down going, doesn't really matter. Okay, and so then this is going to turn over here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line up here at the top. I'm going to tuck it under my scant 1/4 of an inch. And once I get that started, now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to grab these two ends. This feels a little bit shorter. Might have to do with scant 1/4 of an inch or not scant 1/4 of an inch. But I'm just going to tug it so that they are nice and tight right there at the end. And then I'm going to do this to make sure that my fabrics are all lined up. And then the boogie. And see how I'm just holding that? There. Okay, get another little friend here. Okay, so now what we need, after we press this seam open, sometimes I wrestle whether I'm gonna, I'm like old school that I feel like I need to always press my seam allowances on top, but you can press them on the back. It's habit for me. You go there, little friends, and okay, so now we need our 2 3/4 inch by 6 1/2 inch house piece or fabric C piece. Okay, we're going to just do that. And same thing, get it started, double check that it's right where it needs to be, making sure I'm holding these two ends so they stay nice and tight together. All right, and there we go, right through. Okay, so now what we need is, once we snip this and this, let's go ahead and press that seam open. Yeah, sometimes it is just easier to press it on the back. And know that I am hovering over my seam here. I'm not really ironing it, but when I get over the whole thing, now is when I'm pressing. Okay, so I really try to press. If you see me do a lot of this, usually it's because I've lifted my iron and it's just heating. Sometimes just that extra heating helps it along. Okay, so now what we need, let's see. Well, let's put our long 2 1/2 by 12 1/2 inch house piece here. This is a little bit of a longer seam. You may feel like you want to pin here. I'm not going to pin here, but don't hesitate to pin. I'm going to start on this end. See, I've got these seam allowances up so that I can ensure that they continue to lay where I want them and don't get twisted. And again, I'm just going to grab this, get started there. And I'm going to separate these two. And I'm just going to start at the beginning here, or at the end here. And I'm going to make sure, using my nails, just to scooch it around. And I can go a little bit further, and I'm holding that seam allowance. And then maybe I'll get to that seam allowance and I'll double check. This is how I'm able to do such a long seam without pinning. Now, I don't recommend super long seams without pinning. For instance, like putting a border or a like a sashing strip. If it's a long sashing strip, I really do recommend pinning those. But how I do that is I put a pin on both ends to begin with. If I'm putting a long border or a long sashing strip, I put a pin at the top and I put a pin at the bottom. So I make sure those ends are lined up. And then I go to the middle, and then I go this way, this way, this way, this way. Does that make sense to you? I am making sure that the fabric, the quilt, is evenly distributed if I'm adding that sashing strip. So that's just a tip for something I like to do. But I always, if I'm doing a borders or sashing strips, I pin those. I always pin those. Okay, let's go ahead and press that little guy open because we can. Hovering over as I am laying this long seam allowance over, just hovering. And it's heating it open just a little bit as I'm laying it flat. And now I'm just going to press and press and press. And Mr. Woods does want to get a pressing view in here, and we'll do that too. He's getting so good at this. I'm just so proud of him. He's so helpful. Okay, our fabric F is there. Let's see. Maybe we'll just put our roof on first. What do you say? Let's put our roof on, and then we'll add our grass. So if any of you saw we had a very busy weekend. I did a little short giving you a tour of our backyard. We had a whole bunch of brush. Mr. Woods is a tree trimmer. He likes to take very good care of our trees and keeping them trimmed as they age so that they grow tall. That's always been his thing. His dad taught him that. He was a tree person as well. And so we had a big pile in the back of just branches from tree trimming. This was a big tree trimming year. You might want to pin this seam. Anyway, so we had this whole pile, and it's just been like a heap there. And we had some yard work to do, and so I had a kind of a bee in my bonnet to move out. He was working on tidying the shed and stuff, so I had got a bee in my bonnet to pull all these branches out and into the burn pit, and we were able to get them all responsibly burned so that we have a place for leaves to put the leaves this year. As we start doing that, it's kind of a team effort between the two of us. Where are my snippers? Right there. Okay, now we have our little house all finished. I'm going to go ahead, with this one, because we have seam allowance here, maybe I'll just press this one toward the house, and then these little seams will lay nice and flat. Maybe we can do that. Press, press, press. Now all we need is our grass or our ground. You might use brown there, or you might not be quite so much of a literalist as I am. I just like things, if it's the ground, it's grass. Should have. And this little blue house, I have really wanted to use this blue again. It's only featured in my block 1. I don't think I've used it elsewhere, but I really wanted an opportunity to sort of tie it in elsewhere in the quilt. And so this turned out to be the perfect spot for it. And see, so each time I get to a seam, I just make sure it's nice and lined up where I want it, up against the other fabric. And I'm still holding onto this end, right? And see, this was slipping a little bit, so I'm just going to scoochy that. All right, holding it right all the way up to the end. Let me get myself a little leader ender in there. This one, it would be a good idea for this one to press this way because we've got some seam allowances here. Let's let those lay nice and flat, and then this, there's no seams in it. So let's just go ahead and press toward our ground unit or our grass unit, fabric F. Oh my gosh, friends. It's a big piece of fuzz. Look how cute. I love this block. I hope you love this block too. Anyway, so much on our plate. So this week, again, Mr. Woods and I will get into my studio proper, and we'll do a little bit of a layout because, as you know, here's all the blocks that you and I have made together. But I have made a whole other set of blocks which are lining up on my design board in my studio proper. So this friend will go in there today, and we'll see what we can't do to work together, an opportunity for us to do a little field trip into that space so that I can start to explain to you sort of what's coming next. I'm super excited. I hope you are too. I hope you had fun with your little house block, and our little neighborhood is growing, and I love that you are here, a part of it with all of us here together. I'll see you next time.